You know, you and I are of a kind. In a different reality, I could have called you friend.
Episode 10, Balance of Terror.
More like episode 9, loser! In your face! Victory is mine!
Captain's Log, Stardate 1709.2. Patrolling outposts guarding the neutral zone between planets Romulus and Remus and the rest of the galaxy received emergency call from Outpost 4. The USS Enterprise is moving to investigate and assist. Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new series of the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. I am your regular host, Captain Mike Wilson, and I am joined, as always, by my faithful number one, my co-host, DK.
Jolan True. I'd just like to say hello. Welcome to our new listeners on the Federation Subspace Radio channel. We're very happy to have you here with us on this, the first episode of the new season of Hit or Miss, and we're truly glad to be part of the Federation and to help in any way we can. So thank you, and thank you to Russ for helping set this up. And I now return you to Captain Mike.
Absolutely, yes. Welcome aboard, everyone. Hopefully you enjoy what you hear. And myself and DK are joined for this episode by a semi-regular recurring guest, our second officer, let's call her. Welcome back, Adrienne.
And Jolan True to you too.
And welcome, everyone. So if you haven't gathered by all of the slight hints that have been dropped there, this now fifth series that we're in of the podcast, we're going to be looking at episodes focused on the Romulans. If you're new to us, we have done series in the past focused around things like the Borg, the Klingons, time travel. So I decided I was going to focus on the Romulans this series, and I'm going to change DK's mind because he claims not to be a fan of them. So I'm going to try and prove to you, DK, that they make great episodes, okay?
See, I'm with Mariner. They're just shady.
If you say so. So welcome aboard, everyone. This hopefully will be a return to form, but if we're a little rusty, we do apologize. It's been a little while since we've jumped in, but I'm going to try and keep to all the usual sections and explain as we go for any new listeners what we're doing. So if you are new here, what we normally do just to start is to have a quick sort of getting to know you and a little bit of a catch up in a section that I like to call Hailing Frequencies Open.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
And, so we obviously kind of know each other pretty well. Normally, if we had any new guests, we would ask sort of, what was your introduction to Star Trek? What are some of your favorite things? But we don't need to go through all that because people can go back on our YouTube channel or on our feed and find out if they wanted to or about all of that stuff. But this being a Romulan-themed series of the podcast, I did want to ask if you have any particular favorite Romulan storylines or characters or anything. And I know it's a bit foolish to do this, DK, given what you've already said, but I'm going to come to you first. Does anything stand out to you amongst the all things Romulan in the Star Trek canon?
I did like the Defector.
From Next Gen.
And sticking with that, I did also like Unification 1 and 2. I did enjoy those, mostly for Spock. I've never, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm not a big Romulan person, but I do appreciate them. It's not that I think they've been overplayed. I mean, Vian said this a couple of, I'm guessing years now about the Klingons, but I'm not into the whole duplicitousness. Oh, aren't we clever and sneaky kind of aspect of it? So it kind of put me off. So I'm open to having my mind changed this season.
Fair enough. And what about you, Adrienne? Anything stand out amongst the Romulan area for you that's particularly good?
Well, apparently DK wouldn't know a plot from a conspiracy. I feel like they were really just trying to create, the anti-logic aspects of it. They were just trying to show, well, give characters, or give this these aliens who were kind of mean, but still, crafty, like, not crazy like the Klingons, just sort of I guess more intellectual bad guys. But they
it may come up during the review, but I mean, it's probably well known that Star Trek was in a lot of ways Roddenberry's attempt to comment on real world things via the lens and the allegory of sci-fi. So if the Klingons were often said to be the kind of the Soviet Union or Russia during the kind of 60s to 80s time, then the Romulans were effectively communist China, which is why they were kind of, sneaky. They had an invisibility field, and it was the way that everybody viewed them at that particular time, whether fair or not. So I think that was, and it's an interesting angle to take, but it also means, as you say, once you get beyond the sort of the 1960s period of the original series, what do you really do with that, I guess, in some ways? And I mean, some writers have done great things with it, but
now they're collecting Borg parts and such. But the Romulans aren't my favorite. They're just not that interesting. But I truly, truly love what they did with them in Lower Decks. So I guess it just now it could be funny and stuff, but I'm not a huge Romulan fan, but watching these episodes lately, I kind of been watching them, and I did just watch that Next Generation one. I can't remember the name right. I just said it, DK.
The Defector.
Yeah, that was good. I had forgotten how good that actor is, and I
might be coming up later in the series, by the way.
Yeah, I really love how Spock's genuine desire to get everybody back together at the table, so I like unification too.
Is that all three parts of unification? Because obviously there's a Discovery addendum to that now as well. So
yeah, that's good. I like it. Yeah, I like what they're doing with it. Definitely. I like where they're going with it.
See, I've always liked the Romulans, and I'm kind of thrilled to hear that they are going to play into season 5 of Discovery. Now that they've officially released a synopsis for the pilot, which is about to premiere at South by Southwest, apparently. So yeah, apparently Discovery goes looking for a missing piece of Romulan technology, which some are theorizing might be the interface device from Next Gen, which seems a little bit too convenient, a little bit too clean. So we'll see if that's the case. I haven't got spoilers, so that's just literally what people are speculating, but we shall see, I guess. Yeah. And you're excited to see any more of the Romulans, DK, or just groaning up?
I was, when I put this one on, I was like, oh, God. It just felt like a trek, pun not intended. But I kind of come off a high with this one. So I am intrigued as to where it goes. And maybe, as I say, rewatching them this time will change my mind on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hope. Fingers crossed. So yeah, well, that'll get that out of the way because we have a lot to get on with, because this is a packed episode of the podcast and a very, an episode with a lot to talk about of the original series as well. So we'll jump into what our next section would be, which will be the hit or miss section, and I'll explain as we go.
What about my performance?
I'm not a drama critic.
If you are new to the podcast, this is the section that gives the podcast its name. What I'm going to do is I have 5 things this week, because I know it's quite a packed episode. I'm just going to name things from somewhere in the Star Trek universe, and then I'm going to throw it to my guests to see whether they think they're a hit or a miss, a little explanation of why, some perhaps friendly debate back and forth if necessary, and then we'll come to a conclusion, because obviously we have an odd number, so we can have a consensus one way or the other, and take it from there. And that's effectively it. I think there's nothing overly complex to get into with that. So as with the Klingon series, I have tried to dot in things that would have relevance to Romulan stuff as well. Not everything, because we want to keep it a little bit interesting rather than obvious, but certainly things here and there that would play into the theme that we're going with. So I should specify that the guests don't know anything about what's going to come up in advance. I'm the only one that knows what I'm going to ask about, so they don't get to find out and prepare their answer.
Now I have anxiety.
I hear that a lot, but it's fine. We're all friends here. We're just Trekkies gathered at
It's almost like this is a quiz, Adrienne.
Oh God, we might not be friends after this, but okay.
I would never do a quiz on Adrienne, please.
Please no.
So yeah, the first thing on my list today, and there's a kind of dual reason for this, is the character Captain James T. Kirk, specifically as played by Shatner, partly because obviously Balance of Terror is quite a Kirk-focused episode, and partly because William Shatner seems convinced that Star Trek and its fans want to erase his version of this character. So, DK, we'll come to you first. Is Captain Kirk a hit or a miss once and for all, and is Shatner right? You just want rid of him.
He's 100% hit, Kirk. I love Kirk.
Right.
I love Shatner's portrayal of Kirk. They say never meet your heroes, and with it being Shatner, I was extremely worried when I met him, but the guy was lovely. Is he right? I don't always agree with Shatner's views, especially on social media. I personally don't like the fact that Paramount recently put out that banner without Kirk, but, you know, you and I both know that I have a dubious history with a lot of Paramount's recent decisions. I can't say that the fans are trying to erase him. Maybe, you know, I'm not fully aware of what is going on out there, but for me, I just think he's a fantastic character, and Trek wouldn't be Trek today without Shatner as Kirk right at the start of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too much into that. The banner thing really bugged me because a lot of people leapt onto that and said the same thing. And at the end of the day, there's one character representing every series on there, and they chose Spock from the original series, which I think is beyond fair. You know, it's not like it was a snub to the character of Captain Kirk. It's just that if you could pick one character, Spock is that important, quite frankly. You know, as a fan of the character, I would say that, but I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I certainly don't think that it's what William Shatner, or whoever runs his social media, was trying to say about it, you know, turning it into a culture war thing, them not liking the character of Kirk because he's not enlightened or whatever they want him to be these days. I think that's nonsense. I think it really is just a matter of they had to pick between Kirk and Spock, and they went with Spock as the more famous character because more people perhaps do know him or do sort of relate to that character. He does have a bit more vitality, but that's neither here nor there. I'll give my opinions on Shatner's version of Kirk in a moment, but I'll come to you next then, Adrienne, and ask what you make of the character.
Yeah, he's a hit. I've been rewatching a lot of the episodes, and the stuff with the women is so bad. But that's the writing. So I appreciate what Shatner did with the character. I appreciate how hard he worked. I keep thinking to myself, well, this is like if I was watching a second season episode, well, they wanted to cancel the show, and look at how hard he's trying, how you know what he's doing, how he's leading, he's putting everything into it. So yeah, he's a hit.
Yeah. And I think the same thing. I think, like I said, it's an absolute nonsense to say that people want to erase this version of the character. I think he's fantastic. I mean, we can't deny there's a little bit of an issue with the way that he is with women, but I do think that's also over-exaggerated by some parties as well. And I think that the overriding effect that I get, the memory I have of Kirk is more, you know, I can't be in a relationship. I already have a woman. She's called the Enterprise. And yeah, there's a lot of great moments like that which speak to his kind of duty and his character. And I'm sure we'll get into some of them because a lot of those moments are in Balance of Terror as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
they are. Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and we've said this before, DK, I think William Shatner, because he is such a parodied character and such a sort of go-to impression, doesn't get the credit he deserves as a dang fine actor who does some great performance moments, and they're overlooked because of the occasional, you know, overacting or the occasional thing that people can latch onto. And I don't think that's fair at all. I think fans know the importance of, because a lot of people, like I said, on social media did leap to the defense of Shatner as Kirk and said there wouldn't be any Star Trek without, and a lot of the acting performance is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, William Shatner, if it puts your mind at ease, that's 3 unequivocal hits from us here today. Yeah. So
as you've mentioned, we've talked about it before, and when anybody brings Shatner up, they immediately go to, you know, the played out Jim Carrey version of Shatner, which is the long pauses. Yes, and when you know, you see the memes and the gifs, they're all from, you know, Whom Gods Destroy or Turnabout Intruder. But when you look at an episode like today's episode, there's a reason this guy was the captain for me, and I can't fault him.
Absolutely. And that says it all, I think. So very popular here with us. So the second thing on today's hit or miss section is a ship. I always like to chuck those in, much to our friend Will's slight displeasure whenever he's here, but he's not here to complain. And it does tie into our theme, and it's probably blindingly obvious, but I'm going to ask what you think about the Romulan Bird of Prey, specifically the 2266 version from TOS. And DK, we're going to come to you first.
I always found it a bit dull. I do love the livery, obviously, but
painted
yeah,
bird.
I much prefer the next generation onwards versions of the ships. It was an interesting. It was well, when you're watching the original series and when it was just the original series, it was always nice to see a different design of ship because let's be fair, you didn't get that many.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think these days it's okay, it's passable. I'm still gonna claim it's a hit, but it's a very soft hit on my part.
Okay, fair enough. So it's a slightly half-cloaked hit in your case. And Adrienne, what do you make of this ship?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a pat. It's just a gentle little pat. It's not a miss. It could have been much worse, but I like how, like, this scene right here, like it's a bird in flight. I think that's cool. I like the design. It's good to know that these creatures evolved on Romulus basically the same way that they did on Earth. So yeah, I kind of like it, but looking at it, it seems weak. It doesn't seem, I don't see the strength of it, like you would see of the Klingon bird of prey or something. But yeah, I give it a hit. I still give
Okay.
it.
Yeah, we should clarify for any audio listeners, by the way, that on our YouTube channel we have got the image up of the ship. That's what Adrienne's referring to.
Oh yeah,
I'm
and
sure
that helps.
I'm sure if you're a Trek fan, by the way, though, you can picture what the Romulan bird of prey looks like. It's very well known. But
yellow.
So you're going to say, what was it then, Adrienne? Soft hit?
I give it a pat. I give it a pat, a soft hit.
You whistle to it like a falcon to.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I didn't think I'd be on my own on this one. I love this ship. I always did. As you said, there was so little variety when it came to the original series because they were so strapped for cash that whenever you saw something different, it was nice. I mean, it wasn't until the third season of the original unremastered show that you got the Klingon D7 battlecruiser. So this was like the only other ship other than the Enterprise and its like that you'd seen. And I thought it was great. I do think it looks strong. I like the fact that it seems like a fighter craft as opposed to like the various Federation starships. They all seem like luxury liners in a way, and this looks like it's designed to be, it's going to be fast, it's going to strike, it's going to disappear. You're not going to see it. I love the bird motif, as everybody's already mentioned, and the fact that it kind of comes up even amongst the imbalance of terror with Styles saying, "Oh, you'll know the ships. They're painted like a giant bird." And I mean, I dread to think about the poor officers who have got to actually, go around however big this thing is and paint the bird on the bottom of it. But,
What would you think if it didn't have the bird painted on the bottom, though? What if it was just that silver?
Well, I mean, we've seen versions of it that are like that in like Enterprise. The Romulans use basically just the same design, but without the bird, and it's colored green. And I still think it's good. It's a good design. Like I said, it looks like it's nimble. It still is. It almost still has the kind of bird-like silhouette because of the nature of the way the nacelle struts are, and the way it kind of it's kind of pointed. And like I said, it looks like it's designed to actually be a warcraft as opposed to like we're out here exploring, having a good time, and if we happen to get into a fight, fair enough. And I think it's one of those things whereby, like I said, there's things in the original series, even for the 60s, that captured my imagination when they were done right. We've certainly brought up the likes of the Tholian web and stuff, and I think this was just one of them. Like you said, the first time you see it swooping in like a bird and you see that design and the pattern on it, or the way it fires its plasma weapon. And I mean, the cloaking device was a brand new idea at the time as well. It was amazing. I mean, I like it. So I'm going to say it's a massive hit from me. And like I said, I'll be out on my own with that one, apparently.
I mean, it's still 3 hits. Just,
that's true.
A couple of soft ones and a punch.
Oh, don't say it like that. I'm not hitting it. Couldn't find it even if I wanted to. So the next one is another character, and there is a reason for this that I'll get into, but hit or miss for the character of Yeoman Janice Rand. Now, I feel like we might have asked this before, and part of the reason is because I was reading that this is actually the character's final appearance in the original series. If you go by, I think it's production order, maybe edit order, one of the two anyway. It's the last time the character appears until the movies. So, yeah, DK, what do you make of Yeoman Rand, played by the late, great Grace Lee Whitney, of course?
I really liked the character. I was stoked when they actually, yes, it was just cameos, but I was stoked when they brought her back in the movies because obviously she went through trouble within her personal life, and that's one of the reasons why she was no longer there. But I like the character. I like kind of where the character was going. And especially in this episode, you do kind of get that sense of closeness. And I think it would have been interesting had she stayed to see that develop, maybe. Yes, she didn't have a great deal of agency compared to, the characters, obviously, these days. It was very much of its time. But, yeah, I've always liked Janice. I think she was a decent character, and I think she was underserved by, the writing at the time.
Yeah, I should say she actually claims, by the way, that any personal issues are nothing to do with why she was let go from the show. She says it was simply because Gene Roddenberry wanted his wife on the show and they didn't want to have two blondes. So you got Nurse Chapel instead of Yeoman Rand, and that's the reason why she was kind of not appearing after that. Whether that's true or not, I'm not here to say one way or the other, but, like I said, it's nice to have at least had a return in the movies, and I think that did rectify a lot of the 1960s attitudes around the character as well. So it gave her that agency that you say she was kind of missing. She actually was intelligent. She had specialty. She knew what she was doing, and she wasn't just getting the Captain Coffee, which occasionally did great, I think, a little bit. But yeah, that's fair enough. And what about you, Adrienne?
Yeah, I was always glad to see her. I think she's a great actress. The writing was so bad, what they had her doing. And when she came back, I was thrilled. I was really happy to see her. Yeah. I agree with everything.
She was in the one episode of Voyager as well when which she came back in flashback. We should have mentioned that, but we didn't.
Yep. Yeah, I was glad to see her back. And I believe all the talk about what, Roddenberry was kind of nefarious about certain things. So I'm on her side.
Yeah, it makes sense one way or the other, but like I said, we're not here to litigate this after 50 odd years, but whatever.
She's a great character. I'm glad to see her. I wish the writing had been more suitable for women. They weren't just helping men, they're to support men or hold on to them when they're they're terrified and the men aren't. But yeah, I
do think it's a kind of it's a more of a step forward than we realize in this day and age, though, because if you watch The Cage, they make a point of Pike saying he's never even had a female yeoman before. They've always been men, and then even gets that moment of I'm not used to having women on the bridge, and yet when you get to the Kirk era, yeoman Rand's on the bridge constantly, and there's no batting an eye about the fact that it's a female yeoman or anything. So I think it's a step forward. It's not particularly great, but. And I do think I will say I think Grace Lee Whitney's a fantastic actress who shined through even some of the truly terrible writing that they gave her, some of the abuse the character took, and some of the more cliched feminine aspects, shall we say, were certainly written poorly, but I think played brilliantly well, and the acting shone through it. So I've always thought she was a huge hit, and I think she's one of my mum's favorite characters as well, because I just remember my mum liking the original series and talking a lot about her. So.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Her acting shone through. That's a good way to. Yeah.
I think she's likable as well. I think that really helps. No matter how bad the writing is, because of the performance, you actually like the character. You're not sitting there going, "Oh, another victim complex," or "Oh, she's being annoying again," or "Oh, why don't you have more to do?" You're just like, "Oh, I like this character. I'm happy when she's on screen." So I think that helps. Right, so the next thing on here is not Romulan related, but it is from the original series. It's another episode, just picked completely at random. And again, apologies if you are a regular listener and we've done this before. We may well have done. We've had so many hit or miss things at this point, but at least we can contribute again, or for the first time in the case of people that weren't on that episode if we have done it. So yeah, hit or miss for the episode, Amok Time. And if you are a Trek viewer who hasn't memorized every episode, first of all, what are you doing here? And secondly, this is the one where Spock has to obey the Vulcan mating urge and go back to Vulcan to mate with his betrothed to Pring, and then in the end has a big fight with Kirk to that famous music, and etc. etc. I'm sure you all remember it now. So first appearance of T'Pau, etc. So yeah, DK, we'll come to you first and think. What do you think of Amok Time?
In a pig's eye. I honestly, I can't, and present company accepted. If you do, fair enough. But I don't see how any Trek fan out there would label this a miss. It's one of the iconic episodes for a reason. It's full of really good characters. You get to the heart of the bond between Kirk and Spock, and I just think it's really good. It's got some fantastic acting in it. Especially Nimoy when he thinks Kirk's died at his hands. I think the
that he's
moratorium of
so
spoilers
yeah.
has passed by now, but
Him!
it's I just absolutely. It's one of the. I bought a tape. This is back way before the VHS tapes were released in the UK, and they released an ex-rental tape. And I believe it was this one on the tape and the Changeling. And they'd obviously not even been anywhere. The remaster was just a fantasy term because the picture quality and the sound quality was dreadful. It wasn't official tape. I hasten to add. But yeah, I just watched it over and over again. I love it. I've got so many good memories of this one. So yeah, it's definitely a hit.
The fact that it's so famous that, they use I can't remember, I don't know what you would call it. I think it probably does have a name, but the sort of theme tune when Kirk and Spock are fighting is used in Futurama as a kind of brief gag about play the ceremonial fight song, and it's that. And then obviously when Strange New Worlds revisits these events in the first season episode, I forget the title of it. Spock Amok, maybe the body swap episode. They have a scene on Vulcan with again the exact same tune used, which is
exactly.
like I do love
that it's. Yeah, I do love that it's so iconic. They're now just playing around with the episode title in different things, like you said, Spock Amok and Time Amok over on Prodigy. I love that they know the fans are so comfortable and so familiar with this one, they can start to play around with aspects of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about you, Adrienne, then before I chime in?
Yeah, this is a fabulous episode. This is one of the first ones I can remember seeing. And her whole thing about, well, then I would have stun. And you would do this and this, but I would still get stun. And stun would still want me. That's a great logic pretzel that he gets stuck in. And I love this. This is a great episode. I love how they have these women of strength. These two wonderful actresses played these Vulcans, and they were just so strong. And I love that about it.
Yeah.
And also the fact that Lawrence Montagna plays Decius, and he also plays the commander. And he plays Ston. So he's in. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
I was going to say that wasn't why I picked it, but yeah, Lawrence Montaigne, I believe it's pronounced. I could be wrong.
Yeah, probably.
Plays Decius in Balance of Terror, the person who gets dressed down for sending a message, gets reduced 2 steps in rank, etc., and then also returned in a mock time. And,
but see, he still got the girl. He messed up, but he still got the girl.
I would argue that that's not particularly a good thing, the way she's portrayed in a mock time, but, certainly if you're going to say the girl portrayed in Strange New Worlds, I wouldn't be complaining. But,
that's an entirely other story.
You should mention, by the way, that we haven't mentioned her, but I think it's Celia Lovsky, the actress, who plays T'Pau. So famous that she spawned the name of a sort of soft rock band here in the UK.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, she's great.
She is great. Yeah, she's a fantastic character. And, she also returned, by the way, that character in Enterprise, which I think we forget sometimes that, Enterprise had T'Pau in it in its 4th season. But so I only have one more then, because I think we've all basically said Amok Time massive hit. By the way, this wasn't why I included it, but when I asked about Balance of Terror, a lot of people started giving their kind of top 5 TOSs, and there was a severe lack of Amok Time, which I wasn't pleased with. So I'm pleased to see we all thought it was a hit. We'd probably all have it in the top 5. I think it's a huge pivotal episode. Develops things like the Ponfar, the Vulcan planet, the people, the culture. It's huge to me. So
it's
massive
huge
hit on my end.
It's a huge for the Vulcan culture. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's shocking for us to see, and the first time people were watching this, I'm sure they're like, what is happening right now? Spock has, he's going to kill him and all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, just even the concept of Ponfar, though, they're highly logical, so they repress everything, but naturally they have to every 7 years give in to this mating urge. And it's kind of like, it's such a genius sci-fi concept that we all take for granted because we know it, and yet it had to start somewhere, So this last one is blindingly obvious, but we've mentioned, obviously, the actor who played Decius returned. to play a different Vulcan role. And of course, the actor who played the Romulan commander also returned in a different role. So, hit or miss for the character as played by Mark Leonard of Sarek, Spock's father. What do we think? DK, I'll come to you first.
I love Sarek. I'll be completely honest. I love him more in the movies. I think I didn't see Babel until long after I'd seen most of the movies. So he was so cold in that first episode, and I know that was the intent, but I like how he warmed up later in the franchise. But yeah, Mark Leonard, fantastic, and love Sarek. I was so sad to see him go in Unification.
Yeah, but it was great. I mean, even his next gen appearance was fantastic when you think about it.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
really-
Yeah.
Awesome. What about you then, Adrienne?
Yeah, huge Sarek fan. Huge representation for why Spock is like how he is versus his mom. You know,
Yeah.
great character. I love how they wrote him, and I loved how his interactions with Patrick Stewart, especially. Yeah, great character.
Yeah, and I would have to say the same. I'm with you, DK. I like the character more, shall we say, during the movies because he gets to display more about his honor and the emotion that's under the surface and things like that. But I don't hate him during Journey to Babel. I understand why you would. But I get.
I don't hate him. But it's just it's a little. It seems it's like hanging out with a friend. And then all of a sudden, the friend starts acting really remote. That's the impression I got when I came back to Babel after watching, say, the Voyage Home for like 20 times on a repeat.
Agreed. Yeah, it is kind of jarring the way he is in Babel, and I hadn't seen Babel, to be honest, in years. And Sarek was a friend, a pal, and then all of a sudden, younger Sarek is a grouch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think it's a great performance. We'll get into it. I think the Romulan commander is the better performance. I think Mark Leonard probably agrees with that as well. But I love the way he portrays Sarek, and I think there's a reason that character kept on coming back, even played by other actors and whatever else as well. So nothing else really to say. I think massive hit, like I said, well portrayed. And for me, I think it was nice to see a little bit of why Spock was the way he was in that explanation, but I got it. I understood it. Do you know what I mean? So, Journey to Babel, like I said, I think it's another great episode that we haven't looked at yet, but hopefully will one day. And great hit for the character from me. So that was a remarkably positive hit on this section. I swear sometimes we do have friendly debates back and forth, but I suppose a remarkably positive one for the first episode back in this series and the first time on a new network, shall we say, is perhaps a good thing. But and if you agree or disagree, feel free, of course, to get in touch with us or debate among yourselves if you're listening at home. Friendly debate, mind. And so that will be on this section.
Imagine if they'd have started listening to us on our Borg debate episode.
It wasn't the Borg, it was the specific Borg in season 2 of Picard, which in my defense, the Rock clearly agreed with me because they even literally have the character of Thor in season 3 go, forget about that crap that happened on the Stargazer last year. So, right, well, the next section then is going to be the main review, the bulk of the episode that we have that we're dealing with here. So the section that I like to say is going to begin the analysis of the episode.
Spock, analysis.
So, as I said, today we are looking at the episode Balance of Terror. It makes sense to start our Romulan episodes with the very first appearance of the Romulans. So, I have a tiny bit of behind-the-scenes information, hopefully that won't be too boring for the audience as I go through it and for my guests here. But again, guests, if you want to chime in at any point, something you wanted to add that I may have overlooked or that you wanted to, chime in about one way or the other, then feel free to do that. And I have a little bit of music that I can hopefully play that might be copyright free in the background to sort of, ease my droning voice while I'm going through this. So let me just see if I can get that going. Hopefully it won't crash my computer.
I recognize this music.
Can you hear it?
I can.
That's cool.
Yes, thanks to Timeless Journey for this one. So, there we go. So, This episode, Balance of Terror, saw the introduction of the Romulan Star Empire in Star Trek. Paul Schneider, the episode writer, is credited with creating the Romulans. Schneider remarked, "It was a matter of developing a good Romanesque set of admirable antagonists that were worthy of Kirk. I came up with the concept of the Romulans, which was an extension of the Roman civilization to the point of space travel, and it turned out quite well." I think we kind of saw the links there, Romulus, Remus, etc. Associate producer, story editor John D.F. Black said about Schneider, "He was the father of the Romulans, not Gene, not me, not anyone else but Paul Schneider. And when he came up with the Romulan characters, they were so wonderful. I mean, they were full. I liked that script a lot." Balance of Terror introduces cloaking devices to the Star Trek universe. While this episode suggests that they're a new development in interstellar history, Enterprise, in episodes like Broken Bow onwards, and Discovery, and things like the Vulcan Hello, established that Starfleet has encountered Suliban and Klingon cloaks in the past, in the years 2151 and 2256 respectively, and yes, that does bug me no end. But we've already mentioned this, but two of the actors playing Romulans later played Vulcans, Mark Leonard Sarek and Lawrence Montaigne Stone. The Romulan helmets shown aboard the Romulan bridge were designed to cover the ears of the actors. This saved the additional cost of creating prosthetic ear points for each of the supporting actors. They were reused in a mock time on Vulcans and the Enterprise incident for the same reason. As an homage, Captain Picard's wedding remarks in the Next Generation episode's Data's Day are almost the same as those Kirk uses. This episode contains the first mention of Romulus's neighbouring planet Remus, which later appears prominently in Star Trek Nemesis. Gene Roddenberry picked this as one of his 10 favourite episodes for the franchise's 25th anniversary, and during Spock's overview of the Romulans, he mentions the planets Romulus and Remus. The map of the Romulan side of the neutral zone shows Romulus, but the other major planet is labelled Romii. Romii. It's not known whether or not this is an alternate name for Remus, or that it is an incorrect usage of the Roman numeral I to designate the planet Rom2 or Romulus 2. But again, believe me, that bugs me no end, as I mentioned already to DK, I think just yesterday when we were discussing the episode. Yeah. Could have done with them correcting that one when they were doing it.
Yeah, like I said, maybe the Remans refer to Romulus as Michelle.
Yeah, Romi and Michelle's high school reunion. So yeah, I've kind of kept the BTS to a little bit of a minimum. So that's all I have, other than bits and pieces that I've maybe dotted in with the, the sections that we're going to look at. So yeah, I'm going to come to each of you and ask what you initial spoiler-free impressions of the episode, and do you even remember the first time you saw it and how you were affected then? And because you're our guest, Adrienne, I'll come to you first this time. Why not?
All right. I don't really remember the first time I saw it. Because it didn't look interesting when I would have been watching these things as a little kid. Really, just the interesting makeup is really what I like to see, all the weird costumes. But yeah, watching it now, I'm loving it. I'm loving this episode.
Cool, fair enough. And DK, what have you?
It pretty much mirrors Adrienne's. When I was a kid, I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I do. Recoiling from this one whenever it was mentioned or brought up, I just as a child in general, it just wasn't that interesting to me. I was incredibly surprised how much I enjoyed it this time around.
Fair enough, and I loved it from the first time I saw it. Really enough, I don't know why. Maybe I was just a very cerebral child. I say child, I was probably like 10 or 11 the first time I saw it. I doubt my mum would have let me watch it as a youngster, or perhaps I wouldn't have been interested because, like you, it was like, well, there's not a weird salt-sucking monster in this episode. I'm not going to watch it on board. So, never mind.
Yeah, where's the weird monster that's supposed to come from around that same rock?
Well, we don't need one every episode. Jeez.
Yeah, we do. I need one every day.
Go watch Star Wars. That's what that's for. Anyway, so yeah, if you are new here, and again, you may well be, we break our kind of review of these episodes into sections, very loosely, but things like starting with writing, plot, then the direction, VFX, the acting, the music and sound, and then we'll explain the rest as we go on after the review proper. But as I said, if the conversation flows a particular different way that goes into a different section, we don't stick rigidly to it. We just follow that as need be. And hopefully you can follow along as you're listening as well. So the first thing I have kind of down to look at is the writing and the plot, which kind of seems a little obvious. And again, I have a couple of bits of information. Bear with me. I know I just spouted a lot in the BTS, but this is only a couple of things that I wanted to get out because they kind of come up a lot during the audience responses as well and stuff. So let me just say the Star Trek Compendium stated that this episode was essentially a sci-fi version of the submarine film The Enemy Below, depicting a cat and mouse game between the Enterprise as the American destroyer against a Romulan vessel as the U-boat. Director Vincent McAvity had seen the 1957 film The Enemy Below, but only noticed the similarities between its plot and this episode later. He admitted, obviously, it's the same story. The book Star Trek The Original Series 365 suggests that Schneider may also have been inspired by another submarine film, Run Silent, Run Deep. The authors note that the film contains a similar plot thread of an officer longing for vengeance, as well as the tactic of releasing wreckage and bodies from a damaged vessel in order to mislead the opposing ship. And the aforementioned Star Trek Compendium also mentions this film as inspiration along with The Enemy Below. So yes, thank you so much to everyone when we do get to the audience response who commented that. I'm very aware it's a U-boat story, it's a submarine story in space. I appreciate all of you chiming in to educate us on that. And yeah, it's very obvious. I think once you know it, if you didn't at the time, you do now. But yeah, we can kind of certainly view it with that lens, and I think it helps explain some things, perhaps at the very least. So, what do you think about that in general, then, DK? And did you get the sense, the feel of a kind of a Run Silent, Run Deep situation or something like that?
I did. My father is very into war movies, so I had experienced that even as a small child. That film, and there was,
Right.
a lot of similarities, shall we say? It's basically Das Boat in space when you look at it, and it's, but you don't see it that often for what the ships are, and I believe you might see it later in the movies. They jazzed them up a bit, they Star Warsified them a bit, but you do see a return to that later on in Wrath of Khan. But I love it in this. It's you get such a tense, claustrophobic feeling that especially when the Romulan ship uses it's what they refer to as invisibility cloak. It is tense. They don't know where it is, so they are kind of flying blind, as it were. And then you get the whole situation with the atomic canister, and akin to depth charges. It wears its influences on its sleeve, but it doesn't cheapen it. I think it works really well, and it was a nice turn of events. It was a nice twist on the usual Star Trek format. At this point, which is go down to a planet, as you've said, salt-sucking monster, someone that Kirk can canoodle with for a little while, maybe a manic computer, problem solved. This was a nice little twist, and I really enjoyed it. Really dug it this time around.
Yeah. And forgive me if I get the number wrong, but we should say as Melvar and Futurama says, the 9 episodes with the energy creatures, which as well, Kirk canoodling, going down to a planet, monsters, or bits of gas that probably turn out to be a child, and their parents are angry at them or whatever. But yeah, I think this is, it's science fiction. Don't get me wrong, but it's also, like you said, it's a military sort of story that just happens to be set in space. And it's amazing that they, as early as episode 9 or 10, whichever it is, I forget, that they were telling a story like this, that they were confident enough that people would still watch it and get it and understand, and that the actors would act it out as seriously as well, as if it was Das Boot or a U-boat story, whatever, in space. So
it is very edge of your seat stuff.
Yeah, very. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's tense. There is actual nervous tension. And Adrienne, what about you?
Yeah, agree. The tension. I hadn't seen those other submarine movies, but the parallels on the ships of how they start to realize that they're evenly matched, these two captains, or this captain and this commander. And how just out of nowhere, they're like evasive maneuvers because only the captains know what's happening or what's about to come. And I thought I loved that aspect of it. I loved the claustrophobic feelings of it. I loved how we got to see inside the Romulan ship. I just thought that was genius. How they're, look, there's this mysterious signal. Let's see what it is. And all of a sudden we can see inside the Romulan ship. And I just thought that was fantastic. And I love how the junior officers are questioning leadership. Like, I just love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit iffy in terms of, I mean, I don't know if a military person would be quite so openly insubordinate. I mean, towards certainly Spock, you know.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
that's
call
why it
him.
was
I
so
don't call him
interesting.
Styles. I call him Lieutenant Exposition.
Yeah.
You say that, but I mean, Leonard Nimoy gets the bulk of the exposition. He's just really good at it. Because so you don't notice when he's like, oh, you know, Vulcan, like Earth, had its aggressive colonizing period, and we were savage, and so if we don't fight back, and it's just kind of like, this is just about the exposition because he's. You know.
The thing is, it's Nimoy, and B, you're used to that kind of exposition from Nimoy because you know he's Spock. He does that a lot, but inserting a character just for that purpose, I'm not going to say it takes me out of it, but you just think, okay.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it, which we'll get into. I'm sure we'll get into, but I like it because I like what that's able to comment on. But going back to the kind of Nimoy thing, I think the writing and the acting sells you more. But I remember one of my favorite things in the episode is when it literally is just an exposition scene. It's like Kirk asking Spock to brief them, and he's like going through the history of we've been at war with them for years, you know, a Cold War, but we had a big war 100 years ago that was fought with primitive weapons, and it was the treaty was done by radio. No human or Romulan has seen each other. The humans believe Romulans to be warlike and savage, and only the Romulans know what they think of humans. And it's kind of like it's well written enough that you don't mind, but then once you've seen this a few times, which I obviously have, when you get to that scene, you're kind of like, yeah, this is info dump for the next minute and a half or so, isn't it? So. Yeah, it's kind of Spock reading from the Star Trek Encyclopedia under Romulans. But yeah, I mean, did you think that during that scene, or did you just not even notice?
I'll let Adrienne speak.
No, I noticed. I like how you said the Star Trek Encyclopedia kind of a thing. But yeah, we need to know. This is the first time we're meeting these characters, and we need to know all this background. So yeah, we needed it.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I mean, we have touched on this, but yeah, moving on to the character of Styles and his role in the story, I love it because I love, like I said, that it gives you a chance to comment on the potential bigotry of war and of these particular conflicts. And again, stroke of genius that we take for granted the idea that the Vulcans and Romulans are, you know, essentially the same species from their inception. And the way that kind of gives you the tense moments of this episode and a little bit of an excuse for, I guess, not really an excuse, but a reason why Styles would be quite so bigoted in an uncomfortable way for the future. But yeah, it's nice that Kirk gets the chance to dress him down and point out his, you know, or even the moments of saying, well, look, it was their war, not yours. Don't forget that, you know. And what did you make of Styles then as a character and as that plot line, Adrienne?
Yeah, it was necessary to have everybody just be calm and have Styles kind of be a hothead about it because, you know, in the end, Spock saves him. And it kind of can bring to light certain, you know, prejudices that he had. But the guy, you know, for the 60s acting, it was pretty dramatic. But yeah, he would have been sent off the bridge right away if he had been acting like that in real life. But yeah.
Well, I was going to say, as somebody who served in the Navy, I'm assuming you would never have seen anybody acting like that to a superior officer and getting away with it. But
yeah, he really kind of you lost it a little bit. But I love all the reactions when everybody realizes that the Romulans are and the Vulcans are obviously related. Like everybody is shocked, and Spock just raises an eyebrow.
I love that scene. That entire thing is so brilliantly and beautifully directed from the moment that you get the screen turning on and then Mark Leonard turns to reveal it. And then, as you said, the zoom in on Spock and just the single eyebrow raise.
Right. Well, also,
good scene.
Mark Leonard turns to look at the camera. Yeah. Everybody's looking at Mark Leonard, but Styles turns and looks at Spock, and he's steady glaring at him the whole time. So it kind of gives you an indication early on that this guy is a wild card, this kid Styles. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, it does try to give you that backstory of, well, he lost family during the Romulan War. He doesn't trust them, and he may have reason to suspect there are spies on the Enterprise. It's not that, you know, unheard of. But yeah, so I mean, I like what he's there to do. Obviously, I don't like the character, but I do love, I mean, everybody that sees this episode comments on it, but I do love the way Kirk sort of immediately says, you know, here's one thing you can be sure of: leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge.
Yeah.
beautiful
Right.
Star Trek moment right there.
Can you?
Right.
So woke. I can't believe they were doing this back then.
Right.
Just forcing
Yeah,
it down
man.
people's throats. I remember when
Things
Star
weren't
Trek
having
wasn't
to.
woke.
Remember the first 9 episodes when it wasn't all woke?
Yeah.
The first 9 episodes. Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
You're not wrong, DK. You're not wrong. I
People
mean, some
are
people have
so
commented, I think,
ignorant.
that I know, but people have commented, oh, maybe it's perhaps even not as far advanced as it would be, because it would be nowadays it would be more like there's no room for bigotry at all, let alone leave it in your quarters. But I think that's a little churlish, and that's a little bit over examining it. And like I said, I think the way Kirk immediately dresses him down is brilliant. And again, I've seen this episode a lot of times, but watching it with an eye to review this time, I noticed so many little moments between Kirk and Styles, and it's just little things that are just Kirk not outright, causing a scene, but just basically letting him know, I'm not putting up with your crap, mister. And there's a brilliant scene when they're trying to stay quiet, and Kirk's kind of pacing the bridge, and Styles is just either staring at Spock or on at the screen, and Kirk just taps his console like, to your work, buddy. Like, focus over here. And I'm just like, it's such a little acting moment from Shatner, but I'd love to think that was like improvised, and it's just him like, yo, pay attention.
Yeah, focus on your job,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your
Exactly.
work. Right.
And you've kind of already made most of your feelings clear, DK, but did you have anything else you wanted to add about Styles in this particular plot?
I don't get me wrong, I do like the character, but as is the nature of of TV, episodic TV back then, you would have these characters show up, play their parts, such as the married couple, well, not quite married couple in this, and then once they would go on to do other things. But it would have been nice. I think it would have been nice to see Styles show up in a couple of episodes, maybe before this, just drop the odd line. I would have felt that the character was kind of more rounded and not just there for plot reasons. But it is what it is. As I say, it's episodic TV, and you have your regulars, and it was very different to TV now. But I do like it. I loved the line with Kirk and the bigotry. I also like the nice little. I love the scene where they're having the briefing around the table, and Styles really lets rip into it, and then Spock turns around and goes, "I agree." I love that little moment, and I just think that shines. So yeah, I do think he had some fantastic lines. I think he was a decent character. I do like that he had sort of a redemption arc within the 50 minutes that we got. It just would have been nice to see him maybe before, and then his prejudices against Spock would have been, to me as a viewer, more not necessarily shocking, but more, they would stand out a little more if you know what I mean, because you'd have got used to the character by then, and then to suddenly see him drop this attitude when confronted with something that he has a personal history with. I think that would have added more depth to it.
I think you are right, but I think it's I mean, you've got to remember, like I said, this is not even a dozen episodes into the show, and it's 1960s television where you can't. They were airing out of order anyway, so you can't have anything in one episode that isn't, resolved by the end of the episode or isn't able to be watched as its own thing. And I mean, even within that, they do have some little bits of continuity. You do see Angela Martin again, for example, a couple of times. She seems to got over her dead fiance pretty quickly by the next time, but
yeah, this is what Adrienne was telling me about.
Really?
Yeah, she's just when you went offline, that's what we were talking about, Martine, and how she lost her fiance, and then the next episode she's hanging on another dude at shore leave.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think it's testament to the way TV was made back then, and I still appreciate it because I mean, the alternative would be to give one of the regulars this attitude, which I think would it would sully them too much. If it was, if it was Sulu or Uhura or somebody acting like that, obviously that's a whole other kettle of fish because of their place in terms of their ethnicity and culture in the 60s as well. But if it was a beloved regular character acting like that, you would be a lot less forgiving. And it does give you a chance to get that whole, as you said, to have an entire arc for Styles and to come full circle at the end of, you saved my life and I've been nothing but a jerk to you. And, clearly this is just bigotry. I now have to acknowledge that fact. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
good for him. I think Styles is, you know how they have somebody in a movie or a TV episode it's just fridging you.
Mm.
Styles is the opposite of that. You know, it's somebody that we're supposed to not like, so we can
Yeah,
see the other characters develop. Basically, just
yeah,
a
he's never
one-off.
portrayed as being in the right for feeling the way he does.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. So.
Right.
And when you look at it, he is kind of responsible for the guy's death.
Well, not really,
No.
but okay.
If it had not told Spock to bugger off out of the control room, then they could have noticed a leak. Spock could have helped them. You know, he could still be alive.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I suppose that's an extra layer to it. Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. To that note, we're going to have a slight sort of just break and grab a cup of tea or something. If you're listening on Subspace, we'll just take 5 and we'll be back to discuss more about the writing and the various things of this episode later. So, thank you.
Action. We're the Silver Screen Podcast. Hey there, film buffs. I'm DK, your cult movie uber geek, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Wilson.
That's right, folks. We're your guides through the world of cinema, from beloved classics to the hottest films in the zeitgeist. On the Silver Screen Podcast, we dive deep into film culture. Join us as we review movies with honesty and respect, offering our unique take on what makes them tick.
And don't forget our Silver Screen Cult Classics episodes. We'll take you on a journey through the hidden gems, the cult films that deserve more love, and the stories behind them. We've a blast welcoming all manner of movie-loving guests for lively discussion and to share our love of films. Their passion and knowledge make every episode a cinematic adventure.
Plus, we'll give you our own scores straight from the heart out of 5 stars. You'll hear our honest verdict no matter how much we geek out about a film. And remember what Arnie said, we'll be back. So don't miss a single episode of the Silver Screen Podcast.
Subscribe now to the Silver Screen Podcast YouTube channel or find us wherever you get your podcasts. Let's embark on a cinematic journey like no other. Whether you're a casual moviegoer or a true cinephile, the Silver Screen Podcast is your ticket to film magic. And
cut. Right, yeah, I mean, so we talked a little bit about, well, quite a lot about sort of styles and that, and, you know, the nature of the submarines in space, but I have a few other things that I wanted to kind of talk about under the writing that I've just got as kind of headlines. I don't want to sort of lead the conversation of them all, so I'll throw over to you guys to see if any of them match what you might think and your thoughts on them, but I will just get us carrying on with the next one that I have, if I can find it, which is, let's see. The McCoy and Kirk speech in the episode, which has become, I think, pretty famous, and which I must say I love. The idea that Kirk is kind of world-weary and kind of, he doesn't take his duty lightly, and he's accepting this responsibility, and then McCoy giving him that beautiful kind of very Star Trek-y, there's so many millions of planets and yet only one of each of us, and I love that scene. I think it's the kind of scene that would be cut, potentially, if you're trying to get an episode down, but I also think it's so vital to the episode, even if you don't think it's 100% related to the plot or necessary. Would you agree with me, Adrienne? And what do you think of that scene?
I love that scene, and it's amazing because that's the scene that they always played when they're talking about DeForest Kelley and his acting in that part. And when he passed away, like, they played that scene a lot. Yeah, that's a beautiful scene, to be honest. The way that he puts his hand on his arm and everything, and
yeah, it's so good, and it's so well played. But as you say, it's a great summation of Star Trek because it has the weight of duty and responsibility, the nature of space exploration and everything, and the nature of friendship all in there. So I've seen it a lot because it's often a clip that they show just to represent the original series. Like I've mentioned before that I watched like the Star Trek 30-year celebrations, and whenever they were like, and this was the original series, that was one of the key clips that they showed, possibly because it's short as well, but it also, like I said, just sums up a lot of what you get from Star Trek in that scene.
Yeah, and it's beautifully shot because it's really more about McCoy.
Yeah.
Talking to him, kind of taking a stand for humanity, really.
Yeah. Well, I think, you see McCoy's genuinely concerned for his friend, but he's also giving Kirk the support. So, absolutely. And again, as much as Shatner gets crap, he's gracious enough to give D. Kelly that moment, I think, as well, and let him have that scene.
Yeah.
Because he's not really even facing the camera, you know?
Right.
So,
and he's so much the heart of this whole series, got to have that. Can't just all be military. Yeah.
And I mean, it fades into what a lot of people have always said, which is one of the strengths of the original series is that triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy representing, Spock pure logic, McCoy pure emotion, Kirk the nice balance in between.
Mm-hmm.
And it's into that role. That's what McCoy's doing there. The emotional side of just support yourself, be there for yourself, don't destroy yourself to make these decisions. And I like it. What about you, DK?
Yeah, as you say, it would probably be one of those scenes these days that would be cut, but it's a beautiful character moment, and especially in an episode that I think is laced with these kind of moments. People diss old, the old 60s Star Trek for its corniness, but you look at an episode like this, and it's just full of great writing and great acting, and. Mm-hmm. To me, it's one of those that shuts the naysayers up.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to say. So, yeah. And so, as I said, I know there's some key things that are obvious. So I wanted to throw it over to you and see if you had any of them, and if not, I can always chime back in. But did you have anything you wanted to mention that sort of stands out amongst the plot ideas?
Me myself, or
you or Adrienne, either one. Really.
I was gonna say, I love Leonard's portrayal in this, but it's only half of the reason why I like this particular episode as far as Romulans go. Mm-hmm. Yes, you've obviously got his I forget his name, the underling that sends the
Decius
to the Praetor. Yeah, Decius. Apart from Decius, I just get a strong sense of honor and duty from the Romulan character in this. Yes, he's world weary and he's seen enough of war. He doesn't want to keep doing this kind of thing. And I think that's why I like this character before they kind of went down the subterfuge and the sneak route that Decius portrayed. I think they kind of explored the wrong angle. Maybe that's just me. Maybe, as I say, my viewpoint will change. I did like the world weariness of the Romulan commander, and I felt more of a kinship with the Romulans in this episode than I have in pretty much anything since, because I just don't like that they went down the cat and mouse shady route. I think that's what puts me off. It gets a little tiresome after a while, and you get those traits in everyone, in every race, in every person, every walk of life. So at this point, Decius could have just been his personality. I think it's when they started to take that trait and apply it across the entire Romulan military that I started kind of losing interest a little.
I completely agree with you about this Romulan commander, but I think you'll be surprised at how many more characters there are that are certainly not as good as this, but certainly like this and not just out for the sneaky Romulan, we just want to conquer everything that you might think. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see as we go on.
Yeah, because, I mean, in a strange twist of fate, during the original series, if you look at Balance of Terror and you look at... Oh, crikey. I forgot the name. The John Colicos Klingon episode.
Errand of Mercy.
Errand of Mercy. The traits for the Romulans and Klingons seem almost reversed to me. The Klingons in Errand of Mercy, especially Colicos, is nasty, he's sneaky, he's vicious, whereas Mark Leonard's character as a Romulan is all honor bound, all duty. And it's interesting to me that as it's gone on, the Klingons seem to be the more honor bound race, whereas the viciousness, and again, I could have my mind changed during this season, but the viciousness seems to have been played up in the Romulan side as things have gone on.
Yeah, there's not as much obvious nobility to the Romulans as there is in this episode, or as there is, although some may disagree, with Klingons, I think oftentimes portrayed as well with a bit more noble intentions and a bit more honor. But again, I think there is those characters in those episodes there, which hopefully we'll get to and we'll reach. But I'm completely with you. Nothing, I think, has reached this level with this Romulan commander of, and again, it's just reiterating the episode, but things like you said, I'm sick, I'm tired of endless war. I find myself wishing we'll be destroyed. I mean, I'm too professional to let it happen, but if we come back and we've destroyed this ship or we've destroyed the outposts and gotten back, then our gift to the homeland is endless war. Who wins in this? And you really feel for him. And again, it perhaps bears saying that in 1960s, having an enemy character that you can empathize that much with, that they're not just as, and I mean, especially in TOS, which, let's be honest, had its occasional, more than occasional mustache twirling villain that you could just, boo, hiss at, and they had no redeeming qualities. It's such an incredible character, this Romulan commander, where you're just like, it makes you think about the enemy as you view it, or at least I hope it does, in society today. And I think, that might have been the intent. Sorry, go ahead, DK.
I'm wondering how it would have been perceived back then. Obviously, none of us were around back then to judge it, but you say it's, it's just a substitute for the vagina kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how that would have been perceived, or would it have had, like you do these days, if it would have had a certain subsection of people watching the TV going, okay, switch it off, that's enough propaganda.
I think people were less inclined to look for that in that day and age. And there's a famous quote that I wish I could remember by Roddenberry, but it basically goes along the lines of, the reason I wanted to make a science fiction show was that we could talk about war and sex and disease and all of these things that you'd never normally get on the air, and it went right over the network's head. So they're just basically, it was his way of sneaking these things in. And I mean, if you look at the original series, there is a lot of that. A lot of episodes do actually comment on real world things like that. And I don't think anybody watching this would have come away immediately thinking that was a representation of us and the communists, or even us and the Nazis or whatever else. But I think it is there. And hopefully, like you see, under the surface, something got through. But like I said, people, I think nowadays, they're looking for excuses to say, oh, it's woke propaganda, it's left-wing,
they're looking for reasons to stoke their own culture wars. Looking at this character, the Romulan commander, and you see his weariness, and you are given in no uncertain terms that this person who is supposed to be regarded as the enemy is just like us. They have the same weaknesses. They have the same tires of, they're tired of war. And I'm just wondering if anybody back then would have watched it and done that thing and just said, goddamn commies, I'm not sympathizing with them, turn it off.
I don't know, because I think it's, if you want to get down the rabbit hole of like pretending it's real, Galaxy Quest style, then I do think that the way that the destruction of, but the way it portrays the destruction of Outpost 4, I think it is, and the death of Hansen is so brutal and so horrible that you kind of, as much as you empathize with the Romulan commander, you also think, yeah, but that was evil. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of, you still did that, which is still pretty unforgivable. It was a sneak attack. You used your weapon to decimate through shields and whatever else. And so it's interesting, I think, that it portrays that, because it could easily have just kept it all off screen and been like, 4 of our outposts have been destroyed, there's 17 dead, and it's a lot easier to ignore that as a viewer and just kind of wash that away as casualties of war, whatever else. But that brutality, I think, is very, very deliberately present, which is perhaps undercuts that a little bit, but hopefully not too much. But it's an interesting scene, I think, to comment, to see why it's there, and to mention.
To give it that counterbalance, as it were, as if we're only following orders, kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, I mean, following it to its logical conclusion, you could say, well, it's the commander doing what his government wants him to do. It's not like he necessarily wanted to do that. He's testing a new weapon, and he's not looking at this as cost of life or empathy or anything else. And so he's just doing, as you said, his duty. But again, I think it's interesting that related to what you were saying about like duty being an honorable thing. It's not always portrayed that way. It's like there's a certain degree of, I was only following orders, I think, at present year as well. That's kind of like, but you did it. You still crossed the neutral zone, destroyed multiple outposts horribly, and now you're complaining about it, but it's a little bit too late.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, that's me playing devil's advocate a little bit, because I think, I mean, it is there and it is for a purpose, but I do think you'd find yourself empathizing with the commander regardless, and that he didn't necessarily want to do that. And, hopefully he's not, I mean, he's not certainly portrayed as like, haha, more Federation lives that we've killed, these vicious dogs or whatever. It is, but it's interesting that it's there all the same.
That's been like kind of transposed onto this mystery predator that's off screen.
So, what about you, Adrienne? We haven't really come to you for a while. What do you think of all of this and that we've been discussing?
Well, I blame Mark Leonard's amazing acting. We're going to empathize with him because he himself is playing this character so sincerely, and he has some lines that show his quote humanity end quote. So that could be a huge reason why even though he ordered our outposts blown apart, which really is his leader, the praetor or whoever actually, sent him on this mission. But Mark Leonard's just so great playing that character that we can't help it.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, in terms of to turn it back around, if you want to look at like an eye for an eye, as much as it's really brutal the way that we see Hansen getting killed, and less brutal, we do see that he still suffers the consequence because his friend, the Centurion, gets killed. And it is still, as you say, because of the performance, it's a very sad moment when I think it's Decius says we can get him some help, and he just goes, "There's no need, the Centurion's dead." And, he just uses his body to look like debris after that because, got to do something. So he does still suffer his own loss. That again, it's interesting that the episode shows you that.
That's war,
Exactly. Yeah. It's nobody's winning on this, nobody's, and both sides are taking their hits, and it's ultimately futile, which, as you say, hopefully people got, but maybe they didn't at the time, and we can only look back and hope.
Yeah, but it also shows the fact, that there are these two captains and these two crews. Neither of them wants war, and they're being pushed into committing these acts by those above them.
Yeah. But having said that, I mean, again, in terms of analysing every little bit, as I want to do, I found myself really shocked when Kirk sort of has to reveal to them, I can now tell you that these outposts in the Enterprise are considered expendable to avoid a war. And it's just kind of like, oof. Maybe it's because it's the hero ship, but you're just like, yikes. I mean, I from a governmental level, maybe I get it. I can kind of understand, but to be on that ship in here, that's gotta suck.
It is very cold the way he says, we're all expendable, and then immediately just flicks off the communicator.
Yeah, but I mean, what else can you add to that? I mean, I think that's more, that's him. That's his way of portraying. I don't agree with this. I'm not necessarily going to stick to it, but this is the orders. Because he even does literally, radio back to say, can we breach the neutral zone? And then you get that beautiful bit of, written poetic irony of like, once it's all over with and everybody's in sick bay, you get Rand coming in and going, "Oh, Starfleet, by the way, have gotten back and said they'll support whatever you do." "Oh yeah, great, thanks."
See, this is why I think I'd make a terrible captain, because I'd be having to break the news to them. But I'd be like Michael Palin in Life of Brian. I'd be like, "Come on, chaps, let's do this."
The opposite of the St. Crispin Day speech.
Right.
Yes.
Or it would just be like Zach Brannigan in Futurama. We're going to have to counter them by sending wave after wave of our own men. Now you're all expendable. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I get it, but still. So one thing I did want to kind of bring up that we have talked about briefly is, and again, it's a praise, sorry to everyone if you don't like this episode, but I love the presence of Tomlinson and Martine, and this is like the first example, I think, of seeing the lower decks on a starship as early in the series as this, and seeing the effect that life on a ship can have on the little person, quote unquote. And it hits home really strongly because, it's something you can relate to. You can all relate to romance, to love. They were going to get married. It adds that extra layer of perhaps melodramatic tragedy. But I still love that it works and it has that impact. And yeah, again, that last scene between Shatner and her when she's like, "I'm not sad, I get it." And he's like, "It never makes sense, but we have to know that there's a reason." And you can just see him carrying that weight and then just walk away like, it sucks. And in a series that is known and mocked quite often for, there's 7 dead red-shirted nobodies that are on this planet and we don't care. It's amazing that one death has that level of impact, and it takes the time to show you that, which I really appreciate about this episode.
No, I do like it, but I think the stock soundtrack that they used for that scene was a little tonally off.
Right.
Because that's the music you normally get when Kirk's, out there sowing his wild oats. So when he goes to the chapel, as it were, and she's there and this like seductive music starts, that kind of...
I didn't read that at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it offsets it for me. It makes me feel a little... I don't know. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Okay. I'm going to have to disagree on that. I didn't get that at all. I didn't pick up that up or anything. But
Come on, Adrienne, back me up here.
Yeah, I liked that it was sort of the day in the life of a ship, like Data's day from Next Generation. You know, oh, over here there's a wedding. Over here there's this. I like that relationship between the underlings, you know, the man and woman who wanting to get married. But that ending scene where Kirk kind of steals the show, you know, kind of they have him walk in and be, you know, the hero or whatever, and try to give her some comfort.
I don't know about that. I think he's trying, but I think to me, I read that as he's giving the best comfort he can, but ultimately I don't know if maybe it's just the way Shatner portrays it, but I don't read that as like, heroic. It's for purpose. It's like, it's him trying to convince himself as much as trying to give her support of like, we both have to acknowledge this reason. Yeah?
That's true.
I think the performances are great. I just think the choice of music could have been a little better on that scene.
Right. Oh well. Did you notice the music at all during that age?
I didn't notice the music, but I just noticed that, you know, he comes in really quickly and it gives her a hug and tries to move on, and she says, I'm okay. And then in the next episode, she's hanging on another guy. So,
well, I mean, it is several episodes later. It's not next week or anything, but yeah.
Okay. It's shore leave. But yeah.
Does the guy in shore leave die?
No, nobody in shore leave dies because it turns out it's.
I was going to say, because then the week after, is she with some other dude? Is she like just working away through the Enterprise kind of thing? Just she's
the
like
ship's bike, baby.
No, I don't mean that way. I mean, she's just like the most unlucky person in Starfleet.
he's at the crew's Christmas party trying to hit on somebody, and every guy's like, "No, I'm not. I'm not dating Black Widow over
I'm
there.
busy."
Oh, poor lady.
Can you imagine? Oh man, what a reputation to have on a starship. So we've been chatting for a lot. So I just want to rattle a few things off from the writing that I wanted to mention, which is all just like, I like the military tactics things that you see in this episode. So I do like the idea of using the comet to make them visible for a second. Kirk not trying to underestimate them, firing blind. The idea that we've mentioned about, you know, throwing some debris out to make it look like you've been hit. All those kind of tactics straight out of, again, war movies and stuff. But I think they help to sell the moment. And I've heard some criticism about like, oh, why are they being silent on both of the ships when they're in space? And it's like, you've got to buy into the atmosphere a bit, guys. Obviously they don't literally have to be whispering. It's not like they're pretending they can be, although they might have someone on comms, I don't know, but it's more that they're in that atmospheric moment of like, ooh, someone's out there and we're tense and we don't know where they are. So just, you know, buy into it for a minute, you sad cynics. But yeah. Anyway, any last thoughts on writing from either of you before I move us on?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think the writing on this was impeccable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've hit on the other section, so I don't think we'll necessarily take as long with that. I have a little tiny bit of information, which is just to say that Mark Leonard has said, and I quote, "The Romulan commander was one of the best roles I ever had on TV." Comparing the part with that of Sarek, Leonard elaborated, "In many ways, I did enjoy that role," meaning Sarek, "but I think the more demanding role and the better acting role was the Romulan commander. Our gift to the homeland, another war, obedience, duty, death, and more death. I find myself wishing for destruction before we return, and he won't finish the Enterprise when it's weakened," which were all my notes, I think, to try to emphasize the acting moments and the things that were important about that character. So, yeah. Any thoughts on the acting from anybody that you think? And Adrienne, again, we'll come to you first because we haven't really spoken to you much.
Yeah, Mark Leonard just knocked it out of the park. He's incredible in this role.
I mean, we kind of have already mentioned it, but yeah, Mark Leonard, Shatner's performance in the episode, from the world weariness to calling out Styles to the battle tactics to the hardened commander that knows his stuff. Leonard Nimoy as the perfectly stoic Spock giving the exposition. D. Kelly stealing that one scene as McCoy. I haven't really got anything else to add, to be honest. So, DK, what about you?
I think it's one of those when you look at it and it's just such a good episode. It keeps you gripped. Everybody's on top of the game. Just, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Shall I move to the direction then and see if there's anything we wanted to add from that?
Yeah.
Cool. DK, then we'll come to you first. Anything that stands out about the direction from you specifically?
There's a couple of shots in this, and I know it's a scene that was used often in season 1 and 2, not so much in 3 once the number of crew members started dying down. But there's a section after that briefing where Kirk's made his decision and the ship's on red alert, and he's walking down the corridor, and the camera's, panning backwards, and there's all the crew members rushing around, and the look of determination. I love that shot. I think it's just beautiful, and you see in Kirk's face and the way that shot's set up that this is not good. He looks world weary himself in that moment, and I think the shot as it panning back and following him as the crew's milling around him, I think it's just wonderful stuff.
Awesome. Is there any other scenes you wanted to point out? Because I have a few that I could bring up if not.
There is. I mean, there's another one right at the end of the episode where he's doing the similar thing down the corridor. I also love the scene where Janice turns up in his quarters, and he's there, and the way it's lit, and he's laying on the bed again. I think the direction and the lighting conveys so much of Kirk's personality in this episode as well, and I think it all comes together to form this. Honest to goodness, I just think it's one of the defining episodes for Kirk.
I agree. What about you, Adrienne? Anything that stands out to you from the direction?
Yeah, same. Well, the use of lighting in this episode is just genius from the very beginning to the very end. I think it's incredible. Also, I really, like I mentioned earlier, love the scenes on the Romulan ship. Whereas if one of the characters on the Enterprise passed away, you'd see them in sick bay. But here, everything is really super cramped. The body of the Centurion is right there in the same room where everybody's working, and you can just see these 3 actors, portraying this, and I think that was incredibly well done.
Absolutely, yeah. The lighting and things like that are all definitely contributing to it. But I think the direction, and again, we've mentioned his name, but the direction by Vincent McAvity, I think, is worthy of praise. And there's some really things that have become really iconic that I will revisit probably next week. Again, without saying too much, but things like, as I've already mentioned, the destruction of the outpost being so intense. The Romulan reveal scene, the moments between Spock and Styles, the dramatic announcements, the tension of the waiting game, and the little things like the framing of the view screen, which again, this is an early episode, so you don't necessarily have that visual language, but the idea that is the sort of the view to the outside and where the enemy might be, and they're invisible. So having that on there, I think, is a really important frame to leave as the kind of focus. And one thing I noticed throughout was that he kind of really emphasizes Kirk by having just a straight beam of light across his eyes, almost on every kind of scene where Kirk has to, from the moment of happiness in the chapel to anytime he has to make a decision. And it's very much like, it's almost as if he's got like the spotlight shining on his eyes where he has to make decisions, and it emphasizes that. So again, just brilliant expert direction, I think. Yeah.
The use of lighting on Kirk's eyes has kind of become iconic. I mean, it really has. It's obvious, but it's interesting, and it happened a lot in the TOS.
Yeah, absolutely. And related to that, then, to the direction, I wanted to move on to the VFX, and again, just let you know, the term photon torpedo was only invented for a later episode, Arena, but the same effect was used in this one, although it was still called phasers. But yeah, that's why they are the way that they are. Balance of Terror was the first episode of the remastered version of the original series to air, though in some markets it was preceded by Miri, and it premiered in syndication on the weekend of 16th of September 2006, most notably featuring new effect shots of the Comet, the Romulan plasma torpedo, and the Bird of Prey, as well as the Enterprise and Bird of Prey adrift. But notably, it didn't correct because it's integral to the plot, the idea of the phasers as, I guess, torpedoes, depth charges, whatever you want to call them. And again, it is going to come up, but it's interesting that Strange New Worlds opted to do the same thing. They kind of pulse phasers effects that look more like torpedoes rather than the beam of light that we might be used to. So that was all the notes I had about the VFX that I thought were interesting, other than, like I said, the ships and everything I think are, for 1966, are amazing. I love the Bird of Prey design. I like the Romulan design and makeup, even though it is just, Vulcans, but it's interesting. It works for me. And yeah, as you said, a lot of the framing and the direction. So, anything from you guys from direction or VFX, anything like that?
VFX, I can't really comment because I ended up watching the remastered version this time.
I did too. Yeah.
But I will say I do, for a new kind of uniform, I do love the Romulan uniforms in this.
Yes. I mean, that's,
Yeah, these
more or less it. Oh no, one other thing, which was the music, and again, you've criticised some of it, so I'll give you a chance to jump in with anything else, DK, that you think on the music.
I know I'm coming across like a real misanthrope in this. It was just that I just felt in that last scene it was a little out of place. Other than that, I think the use of music was really good, added to the tension.
Fair enough.
You could have messed it up so badly in this. What is essentially a nautical kind of episode, so tense. You really could have messed it up. But to me, they did a perfect job up until that last scene, and by that point, the tension was kind of, you'd passed that tension. You were on the wind down after that, so I can still kind of forgive him for that, even though I thought it was a little, tonally strange.
Yeah, and I think the same. I think it's perfectly well used dramatic music when it needs to be, but I also think it's good that they know when not to use music to add to the tension as well. So there's an awful lot of, noticeably, there isn't any background music. And the only other thing I can add is that I quite like the English hymn from the start. But yeah, anything else from anyone on anything at all then, and then we'll start to wrap this up.
Nope.
No, I think we've pretty much covered this one.
Great. So we're going to jump then into our favourite character moment and line, and then we'll go to the audience response. Then we'll give our conclusion and score, hopefully from there. So, yeah. Again, Adrienne, as the guest, we'll let you go first and ask who was your favourite character in this.
The Romulan commander is my favorite.
Wow. Any reasons you want to go into as to why? Or
Imagine the episode without him.
Fair enough. That's a very succinct way of putting it. That's fair enough. What about you, DK?
It's Kirk.
Kirk, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was going to be one of the two. Any reasons for why Kirk?
Well, I did. I mean, it's what I said earlier. You really see why he's regarded as such a good captain in this. But I'm just going to repeat, what Adrienne said, and just say, imagine this episode without Kirk.
We don't have to. We saw exactly what would happen in these events without Kirk, and we will address that next week.
Yes, we will.
But yeah, so yeah, my favorite character was also the Romulan commander. I think it's a fully three-dimensional, relatable, and identifiable performance that stands the test of time. So that's what I went with. And what was your favorite moment or scene in the episode, Adrienne?
Well, I'm assuming that most people would say it's the last scene with the Romulan commander. But for me, when he's going to use the body of the Centurion as fodder, and he has to make that decision, that's my favorite scene.
Yeah, fair enough. DK, to you?
I'm going to have to go back to what I said earlier. The briefing around the table, and then the alarm kicks in, and the look on Kirk's face as he's walking down that corridor. Yeah. To me, that's incredibly moving.
I didn't really make enough of this earlier, but again, it's not my choice. But I do love what you mentioned earlier, where Styles is basically needling at Spock about like, oh, we need to do this. I'm interested in why you think this. And then, as you said, to everyone's surprise, Spock just says, yeah, I agree. Attack them. It's just such a good moment. Yeah. Not what I went with. I went with. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt. I do like the fact that they didn't do the regular thing in Star Trek of Spock coming out with an opinion and then McCoy kind of needling him about it. I like that. I like that they showed how serious this situation was by not immediately going back to that kind of interplay between them.
They still had those points, though. I mean, I think they are still on those sides of the debate, as you say, but obviously they realize the importance, so it doesn't come down to a cat fight. It would be silly. But yeah. No, the scene that I went with, for all the reasons that I've already mentioned, is the scene between Kirk and McCoy. don't destroy the one named Kirk. So I love that scene, and I think it's, again, it could easily have been cut, but I'm glad it wasn't. And Adrienne, what was your favorite line in the piece?
Forgive me, old friend, but I must use all my experience now to get home.
Nice, good call. DK?
It's predictable, but it's the leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge.
Thankfully, we have all picked different ones then, because I went with, I regret that we meet this way, Captain. You and I are of a kind. In a different reality, I might have called you friend. So, yeah.
Ooh, I just got chills.
That's just my acting. I'm just that good. Yeah, I love that whole quote, the whole quote, everything that comes after it and everything as well is beautiful. But yeah. So what we're going to do now then is we're going to jump into the section that I call subspace communications.
Incoming transmission.
And what this is basically our audience response section. And I will preface it this week by saying thank you so much to everyone that contributed, mainly through Facebook groups, to the audience response to this episode. It is perhaps telling of how popular and well-known an episode it is that the response that I got was frankly ridiculous. If I had read every last bit of feedback, we'd have been here for 2 hours easily just reading that. So I haven't had a chance to get to all of it. And if you contributed feedback and I haven't read it out, I am so sorry. I did my best to try and cultivate, enough of a sample that we could have some kind of section here. And hopefully I've got a decent cross section. But like I said, we just could not have got to everyone because the response was overwhelming. But do keep on, please, responding in that way to other episodes, whether they're as popular as this or not in the future. And so, yeah, I'm going to start us off with the things that aren't from Facebook, from our various fans. Obviously, I just asked, what did you make of Balance of Terror and what score you might give it out of 5 stars, which is how we rate things. And the first one that I got is on let's say Blue Sky at tlbklaus.bsky.social, just says an excellent remake of The Enemy Below. Fair enough. Over on, let's see, Classic Trek Talk. I'm not sure which. Oh, that was on Discord. My mistake. Over on Discord, on the Star Trek Refugees channel under Classic Trek Talk, Bryce says my favorite TOS episode of all time. Also thoroughly enjoyed the Strange New Worlds version. Over on Mastodon, Christopher at TSPOE_pods at mastodon.social just says, brilliant episode. I really like the in-your-face tackling of the racism felt by the Navigator. Keep your bigotry in your cabin. Mark Leonard was masterful at conveying the weariness of the Romulan commander. Even if the script hadn't expressed it, I think you still would have picked up on it through his actions and emotions. This is one of the 5 out of 5 episodes of the original series. And from DK's personal Facebook, I did see that somebody responded to you, DK. Perry Brooker just says, one of the best ever episodes of the original Star Trek. A perfect take on a submarine story with the added look at bigotry and the classic message that the people who fight each other in the combats are the pawns of their government being fed propaganda. In a different reality, I could have called you friend. I hope I haven't misquoted after all these years. Excellent acting all round and nicely directed. Mark Leonard was perfectly cast and had the classic acting gravitas to pull off the role, bringing dimensions to the character which made it all gel. And I'm going to go to the Star Trek Family Facebook group next and say that John Salcedo said, it's required viewing if you're watching anything Star Trek. Mark Sagan says, Mark Leonard's performance was incredible, powerful and subtle at the same time. Eamon Moffat adds, Romulan episodes are always among my favourite. Loved Picard Season 1 for that reason, and it looks like Romulans are going to factor into Discovery Season 5. Deborah Schwinn says it's my number 2 after Amok Time, just to prove me wrong about nobody mentioning that one. Chris Murphy says one of my favourite TOS episodes. Oliver Schnell has some quite in-depth feedback and just says, this episode, in my humble opinion, is the best Trek episode and one of the finest hours of TV ever produced. 5 out of 5. In 2009, I had the chance to meet director Vincent McAvity, and chat with him about making the episode and working with Shatner, Nimoy, and Mark Leonard. I love pretty much every aspect of the episode. Styles butting heads with Kirk, mirrored in the Romulan commander and Decius. Fred Steiner's iconic Romulan theme, which was reused for Picard Season 1. McCoy's Don't Destroy the One Named Kirk speech. The episode is just so dang good. My favourite bit of acting by Shatner also occurs in this one. Right at the end, when he leaves the chapel, he is tired and weary. He walks through the corridor and very subtly shifts his posture because he knows his crew needs a leader with confidence. So subtle and so good. I could go on and on. I guess I know what I'll be watching for the umpteenth time tonight. Bob Daniel-Felser simply says 6 stars. Mark Durl says, whenever I rewatch Balance of Terror, it always makes me wonder about what enemy soldiers are thinking on the other side of the battlefield. Jamal Taylor says it's my favorite episode, 5 out of 5. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. It remains one of the best lines in the series. On top of the submarine movie feel, the episode manages to show how multifaceted life in Starfleet is. Exploration, resupply, defense, and at the end of the episode, the offer to rescue the survivors of the enemy ship show an ability to show a level of compassion that humans today as a whole seem intent on failing to match. Scott Bauman says a spectacular episode, not just of Star Trek, but of television as a whole. At the time, it really showed what the small screen could accomplish in the fields of action and drama. 5 stars, no notes. Stan Fishman agrees that Mark Leonard was great in the episode, and then says, I'm an original Trekker. I began watching in '66 on Armed Forces television. Wow. Thank you, Stan. But I've split up this feedback because there's so dang much this week, so you don't just have to listen to my voice droning on. I'm going to enlist my co-host and our guest this week to add to this. So first of all, DK, I believe the first group that you have is from the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Facebook group. Is that right?
It is, yes. And we'll start with Craig Winterson. He says, it's the best. It showed the brilliance of Captain Kirk as a tactician. And Luis Angel Rosario replied to him with Kirk saying, he did the same thing I would have done. I won't underestimate him again. Vernon Hicks just, goes straight into the leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. William R. Hughes simply says, Balance of Terror is one of the best. Frank West says, this episode ranks in my top favourites, just below Doomsday Machine and Immunity Syndrome. I've always favoured the ship-based episodes, even though I like all of them to some degree or another. Dinah Goldman says, one of the best, and the Enterprise incident too. Great introduction to Mark Leonard. Ethan H. Jones says, one of the best episodes of the original series. William Ridgway also says the same, one of the best Star Trek episodes in my opinion. As L. Williams says, great episode, I love it, I give it a 10. Jeremy Wood, he says, I thought it was ultra fantastic. Oof, not just fantastic, ultra fantastic. The story, the conflict, the resolution, all perfect. Steve Smith says, it's the gold standard, the best episode of the original series. Flawless even today. Remarkable, given original series dated a bit and some episodes haven't aged well at all. James Alrogan, forgive me if I mispronounced that, but he gives it 5 out of 5. Just once you've got to see a Romulan Captain Kirk, professional, intelligent, and just like Kirk, hating war. It was a fair fight with each ship, and the captains were equal. Wish it was a real battle without writers' favouritism. Who would really win? Scott Thomas says it's perfect and gives it a 5. Samuel Morrill says one of the best episodes of the franchise. In fact, after a long day at work, I'm going to watch it. Jeremiah Kasperowitz says my absolute favourite episode of all time. Johnny Gold 7 gives it 10. One of the best episodes of Star Trek. Mark Leonard, best performance in Star Trek. Peter Ambrose gives it another 5-star. That's one of my favourite episodes, he says. And Nick Brugel says a perfect episode. Bob Daly, he says both the original and the remake, one of my favourite episodes. So now I have to rearrange my display to show my new discovery in my attic. And he has a one of the old Playmates Romulan Birds of Prey ships.
I asked him if I could use the picture, so I will put it on screen on our YouTube channel nice because I think it's amazing. It's so cool.
So that's from me. So over to you, Adrienne.
Yeah.
I believe I have Star Trek Universe Facebook.
Yes, and I think you should have Star Trek Ships of the Line group as well under there. So.
Okay, great. Russell Handelman says, one of the all-time greats. I especially like the distinctive style of the Romulan dialogue. Its use of archaisms gives a histrionic grandeur that's almost Shakespearean. Paul Tarosian, IMHO Balance of Terror is the best TOS episode. Doomsday Machine, Sydney on the Edge of Forever, Mirror Mirror, and The Ultimate Computer round out my top 5. David Simon says, Simon says, sure he's never heard that before. If you wanted to show an episode to a person who had never watched Star Trek, I'd start with this one. Starfleet says it stands for something, and in most episodes it really stands for whatever the plot requires, hence all the Prime Directive issues. But Balance of Terror and the Corumbite Maneuver stand out as two of the finest episodes of This Is Who We Are. Read who we have the potential to become. Your mileage may vary. Andrew Gilmore says, one of my favorite episodes. Jim Pence says, at least 4 stars. Robert Elmer says, my favorite TOS episode. Keith A. Wallenberg said this episode usually makes fan-generated top 10 lists. I agree with that assessment. Very Vulcan of him. Andy Jones, Balance of Terror and Space Seed are the best! ! Ryan Stewart, one of the best, top 5 next to Space Seed. Oh, apparently they get along. Joseph Ferris gives it 5 stars. The original series could be goofy and campy at times, but this was not one of them. I really enjoyed the hunt, tactics, and strategy that both commanders displayed in this episode. They treated the battle like a battle between 2 submarines stalking each other, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then in the end, nothing but respect for a very worthy opponent. Add to that confronting racism, bigotry, born out of the war of long past. Having grown up in the South, Georgia in particular, I have personally witnessed the hatred directed at an enemy of war long over. Still some places in Georgia where you can't even mention General Sherman. Yeah, great episode, 10 out of 10. This is a must-see. Tony Carter said, I loved it, but it was just a U-boot story in space. Robert Carr, Tony Carter, I saw the first submarines were just Star Trek in the water.
Yeah, I said I saw this first submarines are just
Right.
Star Trek in water, which
Exactly.
is my favorite comment.
That's funny. William Messenger says, my first Star Trek episode ever, if I remember correctly. It's still my favorite. Jeremy Avery, who is a top contributor, says 5 out of 5. This episode displays brilliant tactics of starships, cleverness of Captain Kirk, xenophobia, attacking to prevent war. Fred Stahlbaum says, that was an excellent episode. It was a bit too psychological for me when I watched it as an 8-year-old, but seeing it later when I was able to understand it better, realized it was a fine bit of writing and excellent acting, 5 stars. And David Gardner replies, ditto.
Cool. And if you'll forgive me, we're almost done. From Star Trek Wholesome posting, Phil Barker says the Romulan commander was clearly caught between duty and conscience. In the end, he did the only thing he could do. D. Binkies says, to me, it's one of the more boring episodes. Plus, it was weird seeing emotionless Sarek as a seemingly depressed Romulan, LOL. I usually skip it. 1 star. Weird. So Elizabeth Lynn Blackson comments on that. While I don't agree, I do respect this. It's a weird thing I'm learning as a writer. No matter what you make, not everyone will like it. But this is the episode I think of first and foremost when I think of the original series. John Nelson adds to that. Top 3 for sure. I watched it last night and thought that gets better every time I see it. Pai Hen, sorry if I've mispronounced that, says best TOS episode ever. The tension, the battle of wits, the submarine-like battle, and of course Mark Leonard was awesome as the Romulan commander. One could only imagine that different reality if he was friends with Kirk. 10 out of 5. Sharon Becker says, I think it's the best episode of TOS. Angela Christine says, I really like that episode. Rigo Rodriguez adds, this episode is a masterpiece. Directing and cinematography make it look beautiful. Drama and suspense are intense, and Kirk is a warrior. Spock, McCoy, and Uhura also shine in the episode. Brandon Everidge says 5 stars for Balance of Terror. I love this episode. B. Oscar Posey says one of my favorites, 5 out of 5. Karen Babsia says one of the best simply because of the Romulan commander and Kirk's recognition of each other's talents at the end and how things could be different, what Trek is all about. Ross Hendry says 5. Literally all that annoyed me about it is the navigator being cheeky to a superior officer in Spock. As he came from a military family, I find it difficult to believe he would be so undisciplined. Yeah, fair enough. And finally, just from my friend Justin, who is going to be on the podcast later, forgive me, it is a little bit long, but I do feel like I have to read it because it's always very insightful and he always has some intriguing things to say if I can find where it is. So, Justin Daniels just says, spoilers, I guess, technically. I think, again, we've passed the moratorium on that, as DK was saying. He says, the last time I saw this episode was a while ago, so a rewatch was definitely in order. I'm glad I did. The nuance had dulled a lot for me. First, I never put together it was essentially an allegory for a submarine story. I know a lot of Trek is the Navy in space, but it's not often that thought occurs. As well, the Cold War era of the 60s is so clearly represented that even a thick fellow like myself sees it. I think it's amazing writing like so much of the original series. To leave any bigotry in your quotas is interesting. Today it would be seen as nothing, maybe even attacked for not saying there's no room for bigotry, period. At the time, however, wow. Trek has always pushed the envelope on socially aware topics. Wokeness, as I know some think of it. This is definitely a great example. It made me smile to hear it again. The theme continues throughout the episode, eventually culminating in Styles having to confront his hatred being saved by Spock. The cold logic of Spock's reply was devastating. I actually flinched. One could only hope it led to some deep self-reflection. The tension of the episode still shines through, even with the dated effects. I enjoyed the faces as depth charges. Honestly, it holds up and the tension is so palpable. The acting is superb, especially considering it's a sci-fi primetime TV show. Compared to other series at the time, it was ages ahead of itself. The interplay between the Romulan commander and Kirk is quite impressive. The mutual respect for each other's tactics, acknowledgement of underestimating each other, the exchange between them at the end. It was very well done, and it's nice to see something come off so well. It doesn't have much of the hammy acting that tends to crop up with some Trek villains. I very much respected the noble self-sacrifice. Where are these Romulans in later Trek? Agreed with you, DK. They don't seem so one-dimensional. Maybe it's just that so much is only hinted at and left unsaid. I'm sure there's 100 other points to make, but I'll wrap up with a rating of 4.5 stars. I only take away for what I consider some technical issues. The writing and acting is top-notch. Absolutely a great way to start off the Romulan series of podcasts. Well done. So, yeah, I mean, a vast array of things with only one, I think, negative voice in that, and a lot of glowing responses from the audience. So, a popular episode, to say the very least. So, all that remains is for us to chime in with our final conclusion and score. But before we do that, there's one thing I wanted to start doing this series, if you'll bear with me, hopefully it won't take too long, which was to say that, Star Trek always tends to have a message or a point at what it's saying. And we've touched on this a little bit, but what was the message that you took away ultimately from this episode? What was it trying to say? Adrienne, we'll come to you first.
Say no to bigotry.
Fair enough. And what about you, DK?
That plus war is hell.
Yeah, and I just think it says something about how duty to a higher power might seem honorable, but it's not always wise. There we go. Yeah. So, yeah, conclusion and scores out of 5 Starfleet Deltas all round. And again, because you're the guest, Adrienne, we'll start with you, if that's okay.
Oh, this is a 5 out of 5 for the original series. It's just one of the best ones, and I love it.
Simple as that. Fair enough. DK, to you next.
Oh God, everyone said so much, but I'm going to start with a little preface. You know yourself, Mike, that I've been kind of trekked out recently.
Mm-hmm.
This one's actually made me want to start back up again. Yeah, every time someone used to bring this up, I would balk. For some reason, I had it in my head that this was a dull episode, and yet whenever I watched it, I was gripped. Maybe it was my reaction as a child and that stuck with me, but I'm wrong. It's tense, it's well acted, the scripting is fantastic, it's proof, if anyone needed, to the naysayers of just how good a Captain Kirk is. It introduces the Romulans with a brilliant turn from Mark Leonard and immediately shows just how big a threat they are and will be in future episodes. It is the perfect submarine episode. It's just run silent, run deep in space. And I've also given it 5 out of 5.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I'll just jump in with my conclusion then and say that I think the audience comments are quite telling on this. It's one of the gold standard episodes of the original series and heck, the whole franchise. The brilliant game of cat and mouse between two brilliantly written and acted starship commanders, a sense of real tension, addressing bigotry and the futility of war, showing real emotion and depth of character. Every line is a quotable gem. Every scene is a masterclass. The only possible criticisms I could levy would be if things like the special effects, which are both silly and irrelevant in the service of such greatness. It's an episode I've revisited many times and will again, and which loses none of its impact each time. So just one more duty for me to perform, and that's to give it 5 stars out of 5, which, suffice to say, would mean that the average was pretty easy to work out again. 5 out of 5, a perfect score for Balance of Terror. Absolutely brilliant. Couldn't be more fitting, I think, and a great way to start our Romulan series. Let's hope it's not just all downhill from here. So, yeah, I mean, thoughts on that, you two? Do you think that's justifiable?
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's one Romulan episode down, and I've not been disappointed. I'm kind of hoping it sticks that way. So yeah, weirdly enough, I'm kind of excited for what's coming up.
That's fair enough. Cool. And what about you, Adrienne? And you had a good time here today with this?
Yes, I had a good time. I have a little thing that I wrote. I wrote a limerick.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay.
Anybody want to hear? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
All right. So these Romulans apparently think they can take Captain Kirk to the brink. But as for me, and Spock would agree, why are their uniform sashes hot pink?
That's just made the episode for me. Fantastic. That is brilliant.
I thought that Adrienne has to do that for every episode going forward.
Funny. This is the first time I ever wrote a limerick.
You've been listening to the Delta Flyers podcast.
Yes, we talked about that on our last episode, and I'm watching the DS9 episode before I listen, just to prepare. But I love how he's doing limericks, so I decided to try one.
Yeah. Oh, I love that as well. They're limericks from some to, I think Armin Shimmerman's defining titles, and they're all doing great stuff. And that's, if I'm honest, that's blatantly where I stole. What did you get out of the episode, and what was your takeaway from as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. So that'll conclude things. Hopefully you've bared with us for the full sort of 2 hours plus of whatever this is. And I think, again, it's an episode we had a lot to say about, and you can see why. And hopefully you've enjoyed us discussing it. And maybe it's prompted you to revisit it. And if so, again, feel free to get in touch with us. You can always contact us via all of our social media links, which are in the episode descriptions on YouTube and our podcast channels. But to give them to you in a way that the audio listeners can experience, bear with me. I think we are available on Facebook. Just look for Hit or Miss Star Trek under Facebook group. We are on Instagram at HOM Star Trek Podcast, just all one word, no capitals. Let's see. We are also on Blue Sky as Hit or Miss Star Trek Podcast. We're on Threads as something. Bear with me. We're on Threads, but it's just my personal one, so it's just michael.k.wilson. And yeah, just take a look around and type in Hit or Miss Star Trek, and if you can find us, we'll be there. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much to Adrienne for coming on as a guest, and especially for that little limerick.
Of course.
Awesome. Hopefully, you will be back next week and later in the series, I'm sure. So hopefully you can do that again, because now I'm just going to be coming to you expecting that. So
oh, great.
I look forward to next week's. And thanks for joining me again, DK, and thanks for being proven slightly wrong on this episode and reigniting your love of Trek.
As always, a pleasure, and this time it really was, mate.
Awesome, cool. And do either of you have any way you want to shout out that people can find you? Adrienne?
I am on Twitter still at AL Park-Tucker 2. Sorry about the politics.
I'm not, but okay. DK, what about you?
As you know, I am notoriously antisocial, so I will just take this opportunity to once again thank the Federation Subspace channel for having us. And if you've listened to it on there and you've enjoyed it, I hope you'll return next time and give us a look on social media, even though I'm not on it.
Yes, you can always find the podcast though, and I'm kind of on there occasionally. So I always say, no, I'm usually on there promoting or asking people the hit or miss questions. So yeah, do enjoy hopefully interacting with us on there. And so yeah, in the meantime, don't worry, we will be back over the next few weeks, once every week, looking at other Romulan episodes, and it will come as no surprise to you when I reveal it next week. We are looking at what might have happened if this episode had planned out differently. We're going to be reviewing the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 finale, A Quality of Mercy. So we're still stuck in these 2266 events. But I'm looking forward to that one. Like I said, I've already watched and made my notes, so I'm looking forward to gathering again next week. In the meantime, do remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material by DK. Please remember to like this episode and spread it throughout subspace. Subscribe to the Hit or Miss YouTube channel and follow us online. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the link tree listed in the episode's description. For any queries or to apply to be a guest on the show, you can also email homstartrek@gmail.com. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcasts Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Mike's Podcasts. Hit or Miss Podcast was based on an idea by Michael Wilson and Will Templer. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be back, but for now, hailing frequencies closed.